In 1187, the Crusader kingdoms in the Holy Land seemed like an unshakable force, castles dotting the landscape from the desert to the sea. But beneath this veneer of strength, deep cracks were forming and a storm was gathering on the horizon. This is the story of how one man, Saladin, united the Muslim world and delivered a blow so devastating that the Crusader project would never recover. For nearly a century, the Crusader states had been a thorn in the side of their Muslim neighbors. But the Islamic world was fragmented, ruled by rival dynasties more interested in fighting each other than the foreign invaders. That all changed with the rise of Salah al-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, known to the West as Saladin. A brilliant strategist and charismatic leader, Saladin began a patient and ruthless campaign to unite the fractured Muslim territories under his banner. By 1174, he controlled Egypt and Damascus. By 1183, the great city of Aleppo was his. For the first time since the First Crusade, a single, powerful leader ruled from the Nile to the Tigris, encircling the Crusader states. Saladin wasn't just a political unifier, he was a master of propaganda. He framed his campaign not as a war of conquest, but as a sacred duty, a jihad to liberate Jerusalem and reclaim the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of Islam's holiest sites. This powerful religious message resonated across the Muslim world, drawing volunteers to his banner and transforming his army into a zealous, motivated force. He was building an instrument of war, and he was just waiting for the right moment to use it. While Saladin was consolidating his power, the Crusaders were doing the exact opposite. Their leadership was a mess of internal rivalries and incompetence. The king of Jerusalem, Guy of Lusignan, was weak and indecisive, easily swayed by the most aggressive voices in his court. His chief rival, Raymond of Tripoli, was a savvy and experienced nobleman who advocated for caution and diplomacy, but he was sidelined by the war-hungry faction. And then there was Raynald of Chatillon, the lord of Karak Castle. Raynald was the ultimate loose cannon, arrogant, reckless, and driven by an insatiable greed. He saw truces not as treaties to be honored, but as inconvenient pauses in his looting. In late 1186, despite a truce being in effect, Raynald of Chatillon committed an act of supreme folly. He attacked a massive, wealthy Muslim caravan traveling from Cairo to Damascus, looting its goods and imprisoning its people. Some accounts even claim Saladin's own sister was in that caravan. This was more than just a raid. It was a profound insult and a direct challenge to Saladin's authority. The truce was shattered. For Saladin, this was the final provocation he needed. He had the justification for war he'd been waiting for. The trap was about to be set. In response to Raynald's outrage, Saladin gathered his unified army and made a bold, calculated move. On July 2nd, 1187, he laid siege to the city of Tiberias, a lakeside fortress that belonged to none other than his rival, Raymond of Tripoli. This was a brilliant piece of strategic bait. Saladin knew the Crusaders would feel compelled to relieve the siege. Raymond's own wife was trapped inside the citadel. However, Raymond himself, knowing the terrain and the summer heat, argued passionately against marching. He knew it was a trap. He declared he would rather lose Tiberias and his wife than risk losing the entire kingdom. But King Guy was surrounded by hotheads, including the man who caused the crisis, Raynald of Chatillon. They accused Raymond of cowardice and even treason, pressuring the weak king to act. Humiliated and outmaneuvered, Guy made the fatal decision. He ordered the entire army of the Kingdom of Jerusalem to march. The great host, around 16,000 men, including over 1,000 of the best knights in Christendom, set out from their well-watered camp at Sepharia to cross the arid plains of Galilee. They were marching directly into Saladin's hands. The march was a descent into hell. It was July in the Middle East, and the sun was merciless. The Crusaders, weighed down by armor, trudged across a waterless landscape under a blazing sky. Saladin's light cavalry swarmed around them like angry hornets, harassing their flanks and rear, peppering them with arrows, and setting fire to the dry brush ahead of them. The smoke choked the Christians, and the heat became unbearable. Thirst became their greatest enemy. Men and horses began to collapse from heat stroke and dehydration. The disciplined army that had left Sepharia was quickly becoming a desperate, stumbling mob. By the evening of July 3rd, the Crusader army was completely exhausted and demoralized. They found themselves trapped in a dry valley, overlooked by a twin-peaked hill known as the Horns of Hattin. Their destination, the Sea of Galilee with its life-giving water, was tantalizingly close, but Saladin's army blocked the way. They were completely encircled, with no access to water and no hope of escape. Saladin had them exactly where he wanted them. That night, his soldiers' chants of Allahu Akbar echoed around the terrified Christian camp, a prelude to the doom that awaited them at dawn. On the morning of July 4th, 1187, the battle began. Saladin's forces set fire to the dry grass, and the wind blew the thick, acrid smoke directly into the faces of the Crusaders, blinding and choking them. Then came the arrows. Saladin's archers unleashed a relentless storm of projectiles, felling men and horses with terrifying efficiency. The Christian infantry, maddened by thirst and despair, broke ranks and tried to flee towards the lake, only to be cut down. Raymond of Tripoli, seeing the disaster unfolding, gathered his knights for a desperate charge to break the encirclement. Saladin's commanders, incredibly, opened their ranks to let them through, and then closed them again, sealing the rest of the army inside. Raymond and a few hundred knights escaped, but their flight shattered the last remnants of Crusader morale. Back on the hill, King Guy made several heroic but futile final charges from his royal red tent. But his knights were exhausted, their horses were dead, and their will was broken. Finally, the army collapsed, the royal tent was captured, and the battle was over. The greatest army the Crusaders had ever assembled was annihilated. The aftermath was a catastrophe for the Crusader states. Of the nearly 16,000 men who marched from Sepharia, almost all were killed or captured. Only a handful, like Raymond and his contingent, escaped. The holiest relic in Christendom, a fragment of the true cross that was carried into battle, was captured and paraded upside down, a symbol of Saladin's total victory. After the battle, Saladin personally offered a cup of iced water to King Guy, a sign of hospitality. But when Guy passed the cup to Reynold of Chatillon, Saladin made it clear the courtesy did not extend to the truce breaker. After reminding Reynold of his crimes, Saladin executed him with his own sword. The captured Knights of the Templar and Hospitaller military orders were also offered a choice: convert to Islam or die. Almost all chose martyrdom and were executed en masse. With the Crusader army destroyed, the kingdom was defenseless. Saladin's forces swept through the land like a tidal wave. City after city, Acre, Jaffa, Sidon, Beirut fell with little to no resistance. The path to the ultimate prize was now clear. On October 2nd, 1187, after a short siege, Jerusalem surrendered to Saladin. Unlike the Crusaders' brutal sack of the city in 1099, Saladin showed remarkable mercy. He forbade any massacre and allowed the Christian inhabitants to ransom themselves and leave peacefully. Those too poor to pay were allowed to go free. The news of the fall of Jerusalem and the disaster at Hattin sent shock waves across Europe. It was said that Pope Urban III died of grief upon hearing the news. The shock and outrage spurred the launch of the Third Crusade, led by the most powerful kings in Europe, including Richard the Lionheart of England. While the Third Crusade would achieve some success and recapture a strip of coastline, it failed to retake Jerusalem. The balance of power had permanently shifted. The Battle of Hattin was the beginning of the end. The Crusader states were mortally wounded, never to regain their former strength or territory. The final nail in the coffin came in 1244 at the Battle of La Forby, where another Crusader army was destroyed, effectively ending their ability to wage offensive war. The legacy of Hatton is undeniable. It marked the irreversible decline of the Crusader presence in the Holy Land, and showcased the power of a united Islamic front led by one of history's most iconic figures. It was the battle that broke the cross and raised the crescent over Jerusalem once more. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this journey into history fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more epic stories from the past. Let us know in the comments what piece of history you'd like us to explore next. See you in the next video.